Hi, I'm Scott Hanselman. I'm here with Glenn Condren.
Hi.
And we are doing the introduction to ASP.NET 5. We've talked about the pattern, we've talked about configuration data, we talked about models, views, controllers, how to move all those things around. We've talked about basic debugging. What we're going to show you now, though, is publishing.
Yeah.
We want to put this out on the web in, production, in quotes. This is a silly application that doesn't really do anything, but we've only so far run it inside of IIS Express or self-hosting locally, running this locally.
Yeah. We talked about how none of the ways that we're hosting the application right now with IIS Express or anything can be accessed by someone not on my machine, right?
Exactly. Like even if Glenn wanted to host my code, or wanted to talk to my IIS, he couldn't do that because IIS Express is a local development server.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do is show you what happens when you build what they call artifacts are. Okay. So when I right-click on my project right now in Visual Studio and I say Open Folder in File Explorer, you can see all of that code.
Yeah, lots of stuff.
Controllers, models, and views. You can see the www root, which we learned is where our
static content goes.
Our static content, our images,
HTML and CSS
like
and stuff, and JavaScript.
Okay.
Yep.
But you'll notice that if you're familiar or vaguely familiar with ASP.NET, there's no bin folder here. There's no binaries. There's no DLLs.
Yeah.
There's no executables.
Yeah. We said earlier that we have to compile our application to a different form in order to run when you're using the ASP.NET. However, we don't write any of that out to disk because it's just slow.
Right, that compiling is actually happening in memory.
Yeah, I mean, historically in ASP.NET, that was always a thing that would appear on disk because we would write it out to disk when we compiled, and then we would read it back again in order to run your application.
Right. So what we're going to do is we're going to right-click on this application, and we're going to say Publish. Now, build and rebuild don't actually make the artifacts that we're going to need when we want to publish.
They can, but generally they don't. They're spell checker.
They are a spell checker, and I can actually prove that. I can also point out if I right-click and say Properties and go Build, there's this option here. What does this do, Glenn?
This will write out, this will, as it says, produce outputs on build. In this case, the outputs are the assemblies, the DLLs, the compiled output of your application.
How is that different than publishing the application?
Because what you need to do when you're publishing, so what that will do is generate you the compiled outputs. It does not package your application into a way that's designed to be run on a server. Okay, and we can talk about the difference between that and other things.
So in this case here, I clicked that box and it made a folder called Artifacts, and inside it is my packaged application.
Yep, and I get my app, right? But there's a few things missing here, right?
Right, it's not ready to be run. There's nothing to kick this off.
You couldn't run this on its own for a few reasons. The most obvious of which is we expanded our dependencies node earlier on in the Solution Explorer, right? And we can do that again here even. We have a whole bunch of little NuGet packages that are pulling in things with the configuration that we used.
Right.
The assembly that has that configuration class comes from NuGet.
This is my application.
Yes.
It went from source code into a tiny binary, but it doesn't have all of the other things, my JavaScript and all the things that I need.
There's no static content in here, right? Like all that stuff.
So we'll turn that back the way it was, and instead I'm going to go and say Publish, and I've got a couple of choices. I can go and publish this to Azure, or I can publish this to the file system, and then maybe FTP it.
Yeah,
or copy it around, or whatever I need to do. So we're going to do two things. First, we're going to do that on the file system.
Yeah, we can compare to what the other one is, right?
Exactly. Now, there's a profile that is, it could be anything. This could be just testing. It could be development. It could be staging. We'll just call that test.
And this does a thing to my solution when we get through here, but we'll see that.
Now, you'll notice here that artifacts folder was where that DLL, that artifact showed up. This is going to be called Publish Output. I can put this wherever I want to. I could even put this on my desktop if I wanted to.
Good.
This is a convention. And I'm just going to bring up, before I do that, I'm going to have the artifacts folder here. And I'm going to point out that there is no release folder and there is no publish output folder. All right? And then we're going to hit next. And it's going to say, all right, this is going to be release configuration. And it's going to use a certain version of our framework. And we're going to use PowerShell to publish that. And in case we had other stuff there, we could say, well, by the way, tidy up before you publish.
Yeah.
And then we're going to hit next. There'll be a moment. I'm going to switch out here. You'll notice the release folder just showed up. Publish output showed up. And now we're going to start seeing things roll into this folder. There's the root of our application. There's the www root. Here's a little kind of a batch file, a little command script we could use to run this application.
When you run that web thing, it does exactly the same as if you had gone and selected web in that drop-down in Visual Studio and clicked run.
We're here.
So it'll host your application in a little console window.
These are the same.
Yeah, they are.
And you'll see that this web is actually a shell script that you could use on Linux or on a Mac.
Yes.
And this is a batch file, for lack of a better word, that you could use on Windows.
Yeah.
It is this here that I could then go and upload.
Yes. And if we have a look in here, we now have our static content in the www root. So that's where your IIS is going to point.
Exactly. Right. So this is what we would go and send up there. And this app root is full of all of those packages.
Yeah, including, well, you've got a SRC in this case still, right?
What is an SRC?
That's the folder just there, SRC. Which is
so that is the source code.
Yeah, so by default, unless you check the extra checkbox, we don't actually compile your application when you publish. We leave it as source code. So that if you really wanted
this checkbox here?
No, in the publish dialog there was another checkbox.
Let's do that again, actually.
Yeah.
So we'll right-click again and we'll say publish. We can publish multiple times. We'll go back to settings.
Yep. So we probably want to delete all existing files because otherwise
and then compile source code into packages as well.
And then this, by default, when you publish without compiling, we're going to send where the controller source code and everything will go up to the server, and you could then edit it on the server if you really wanted to, or maybe you could publish to an Azure website and use the Visual Studio Online. I believe is still a thing you can click on to edit your site live.
And as you were talking, you'll notice that now suddenly our packages folder
have
has
an application in it.
Those dependencies, and then our own application is itself a package
with an assembly inside of it that it has my compiled code.
And my SRC folder is gone
because we
and I don't
source.
Necessarily want to upload my source now.
Yeah, and I mean, but for those of you who are coming from say PHP or something like that, you just upload the code there. And
so what do we upload at this point? App root?
This whole thing.
Upload the whole folder?
Yeah, well, unless you could leave behind web and WebCMD if you really want, but you do need both app root and www root. And typically, though, you just take the whole publish output folder.
Do we tell our hoster that we want to boot off of app root?
You don't have to. No, you tell your hoster that you want to boot off www root.
Everything starts here.
Yes.
Right.
So in the case of IIS, we've done some special things to help IIS work by dropping a web config and things like that to make it just work in IIS.
Now, to prove it, we can actually close Visual Studio right now and close the browser.
You're going to double-click web?
I'm going to double-click on web.
Looks like we just got an error, but I'm not sure.
Yep, they did. Let's find out what's going on here.
We're going to go to where we were running, and then we're going to run web. And what did we get? Oh, we got a path too long exception.
It says our path is too long.
Yeah, so this is because where this folder is super deep inside the file system, and there is a maximum length of file paths that you can hit accidentally sometimes.
Kind of an unfortunate hassle that you get on Windows sometimes.
Yeah.
And it's good that we caught it because then you can catch this for yourself.
For those of you who are interested, not very long ago, I'm going to say a week or two ago, the .NET team, the CLR team, they recorded and live presented I think it was a design discussion where they were discussing how they were going to try and solve long path issues for people.
Because it's not that Windows doesn't support it, it's that aspects of Windows and the .NET framework don't support it.
Yeah.
So I just picked up that publish output folder and I just moved it to somewhere shorter.
Yes.
I'm going to go and type web now.
Now we're good.
And now it's started up on localhost 5000.
This is the same as when we pressed F5 earlier and we had web in IIS. This is in Visual Studio.
But I want to show that the application is running exactly as we wrote it.
Yeah.
There's our About page with our form.
Yeah.
And it's running outside of IIS in this case, but more specifically outside of Visual Studio.
Yeah.
And when
it's
I
running
close it,
from
it's
this published location.
It's running from that folder right there, which I could put on a thumb drive and run it from there if I wanted.
Yeah, we've done that before, right? We've actually taken this publish output before, put it onto a thumb drive and plugged it into some guy's Mac in the audience.
Absolutely.
Right?
So now I'm going to go back in here and open that application up. And now we're going to publish to the actual internet.
The actual internet.
Yeah, instead of publishing to my desktop.
Yes. That sounds great.
Yep, that long file name thing can be frustrating, especially when you have like a long name or a long username.
Yeah.
I usually just change things. I personally don't like to develop in C user. I develop in like C
code.
/code or /dev.
So we had this discussion on the ASP.NET team the other day, and I kind of assumed everybody did that, and it turns out that's not correct.
Especially not when it's the default in Visual Studio.
Yes, but I mean, even when it's not the default, I asked several developers on the ASP.NET team and got 7 different answers for where they put source code.
It's all about choice. So here we're going to pick Microsoft Azure Web Apps. And my Microsoft account is already associated here.
And is that because you've logged in up the top right, which
that's
we talked about earlier?
That's because the very first time I ran this, it logged me in.
Yeah.
And it logged me in because I've logged into Visual Studio here. It's going to go, and it's making a call right now and saying, are there any existing web apps that you want to publish over? Now, while that is making that call, I want to point out that you can go and search for Azure Trial. And you can go to azure.com.
Yep.
And there is a free trial. And when you sign up for that free trial, you'll get $200 to spend on any Azure service.
Yeah.
And one of those Azure services
is Azure Websites.
Is Azure Websites. But here's a little trick, a little tip. I don't know if you know about this. If you go to try.azure websites, if you know how to type, websites.net. Have you seen this? You can actually create one for free without actually signing up or giving your credit card.
Without even creating an account?
So I'm going to make a web app.
Interesting.
I'm going to hit next. I can make an ASP.NET starter site, hit create. All I have to do is sign in with one of my social accounts. You don't have to put any credit cards. I'm just going to sign in with my Microsoft account.
Right.
And it's going to go and create that, and it'll let me play with that for an hour.
Right.
See how I like it. I can also do Node and Java, PHP.
So the other thing is that if you do create an account in Azure, you can also create Azure websites for free anyway, right?
Right. It's just whether or not you want to take the time to sign up for a trial, or whether or not you want to put your credit card in for potentially staying in there.
Yeah.
So here,
but even if you do, so the key I was going to say there is, even if you do put your credit card in and make an Azure account and stuff, you can use Azure Websites for free without it ever charging your card.
Absolutely. In this example here, I've just made an application. Here's a little web app. I can download it, I can edit it online, I can play with it in the Azure portal.
That's pretty cool.
And then sign up for a
Later
trial.
on, yeah.
And one of the things that's nice about the trial is that even if you choose not to keep in the trial, you get 10 web apps for free. So you can have free web apps and you can play without having to worry about it.
It's pretty amazing.
So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click New rather than signing up again. And we'll say MVA, with Glenn. And now it's checking to see if anyone's made that name before. And I'll pick my, my free trial. And I can go and make a service plan and put that in a particular location, MVA with Glenn.
Yeah. This was always, picking a name was always a fun game when presenting at conferences, because everybody's already created
where do you put these things? So here's my plan, whether or not I want a database server. In this case, I'm not. And we'll hit create. And this is going to go and create this web app.
It's going to create an Azure website, right?
So that took about 2 minutes, 3 minutes, but we fast forwarded time so we wouldn't waste your time because it was going and creating that application. And when it did that, it automatically filled out all the things I needed. My password, it basically brought down what's called your publishing profile.
Yeah.
Okay? And then when I hit next, same options pop up, right?
Yep.
And then preview is really nice because this will actually show you what files will get uploaded. This is especially nice if you've made one small change.
Yes.
And you just want to see that, oh, well, these 2 files are the ones I know I changed, or this PNG, this graphic.
Right. So this is now talking to the server again to work out what's already there.
Exactly. So now
it's going to be everything.
It's going to be all ads. So now we're going to hit publish and it'll send up there.
Right, yeah.
So here's our build. And then now it's copying files. So that looks like that published. That took about a minute, minute and a half. We snipped that out again to save time. And then there you go. So now MVA with Glenn, .azurewebsites.net is up there. Now, anything that the name is .azurewebsites is what you'll end up with.
Yeah.
But of course, you can go and have your own custom domain name with basic websites or some of the other paid options. Your free website will be whatever .azurewebsites.net.
That's right. Unless you're paying for a domain to point at it and you're going to play around with stuff as well, right? You can, when you decide to make it real.
I actually have 19 different little domains, just little stuff. My podcast uses Azure Websites. Basically everything I've got, except for my blog, is all on Azure.
Yeah, I mean, it's actually a pretty amazing thing, right? Like, it's super useful for just deploying to a free site and testing it out. But then the fact that you can then easily make it a real thing that is capable of running your production website at at significant load. So you can go all the way from toy application all the way up to thousands and thousands of people talking at your site all the time, right? It's pretty amazing.
So in this example here, now I'll just go to the Azure portal, and I'm going to hit Browse, and scroll down to Web Applications.
Yep.
And we'll see if Glenn's in there.
There's Baby Smash.
Yeah, Baby Smash, my game, is in there. Notice here, MVA with Glenn. I want to point this out. That's what we created. Now, we created it from Visual Studio. We could have created it from the command line. We could have created it from Azure itself.
Yep.
And I want to point out that it is in free.
Yes.
I pay for these.
Yes.
But even though you pay, you can still make as many free ones as you want, which is nice for testing.
Yeah.
I can then click on MVA with Glenn. We can see that it's running under my free trial. We can see my usernames. And I could even potentially FTP in and see that that's really there. You can still FTP with something like Azure in the cloud. If I maximize this, we can see the requests.
Yeah.
There's us actually hitting that website a little while ago.
Yeah.
We could set up things like continuous deployment and auto scale. We can see also that the pricing tier is free, but I could go in if I wanted to and switch to, for example, shared or basic. And now right now it's actually loading the pricing. So I could go to shared for $9 a month, and then all the way up to some giant thing when my startup becomes super famous.
Obvious. Which clearly this site is destined.
This site is destined for fame. Yeah. As such, I'm going to delete it.
Excellent. Just in case somebody else tries to take it.
Yep. So so when you watch, you will find that MVA with Glenn is already gone. So that's being deleted.
No doubt the first person to watch this will go recreate it.
Exactly.
Just for all those people who are ready to hit it when they see this.
Yeah,
video.
well, hopefully you're following along and you've tried that as well, and that's now gone.
Yeah.
All right. So we have seen how you can publish your ASP.NET applications to a local IIS. In the advanced MVA, which at the time of this recording hasn't been done yet, but soon it will be. We'll also look at ways to publish to Linux, publish with Docker, FTP, and do all sorts of other flexible things.
Yeah, we'll try and show some of the more advanced scenarios. Yeah,
absolutely. We're having all sorts of fun here with Microsoft Virtual Academy, learning about an introduction to ASP.NET 5. We'll come back with even more.
See ya.